All right, we are ready to do some serious talk about resilience. And I'm not just talking about any type of resilience. We're talking about like radical resilience and love, a little alliteration, but I really want to differentiate. Resilience is such a great topic and the research around it is fascinating. I spent several months in grad school. I was going to originally do my dissertation on resilience. Unfortunately, nobody on staff had any experience or expertise in that. But with general resilience, we hear a lot of great advice, things like, just don't quit, never give up, be tough, work harder. And all those things can be good advice. They can also not be great advice depending on the situation. But it's really vague, right? It doesn't really give you any sense of what you can specifically do. It's not particularly practical. And you can spend I've always known I'm not a quitter. That doesn't mean I haven't spent a lot of time in self-destruct mode, right? I can cause a whole lot of avoidance, procrastination, engage in a lot of vicious cycles, still knowing I'm not going to ultimately quit. But what I'm interested in is how do we start to respond increasingly quicker ways where we're responding in our most agile, resilient, right? We're ready to get into growth mode. So we experience setbacks, rejection, failure, and our response to that, because we've created a fully personalized, customized, resilient strategy, that we're able to take one negative moment and then immediately respond by getting to constructive growth action. So, Mr. David Osk, Mr. Resilience here, what do you think about this topic?
No, I love this topic, and honestly, I like your humility around it, right? Because, I mean, the word resilience kind of presupposes, right, sitting in a ditch somewhere and feeling like you're stuck, that kind of thing. So, in fact, I like that word so much it makes me want to stand up. So I think I'm going to.
Look at this. He
So
just increased his resilience by 10%, everyone.
Right. Yeah. No, it's such a great topic, and so much of life can be, difficult. There's so many challenges that pop up, and some of them are incredibly difficult, and some of them only appear difficult. And of course, you use that phrase quite a bit. Double down. Well,
Yeah.
boy, things are challenging in this moment, and I'm feeling threatened, or I'm feeling, I don't know, just fearful or something like that. So instead of maybe a third option, right? We think, well, I'm gonna cut and run, or I'm doubling down and I'm staying the course and I'm, sticking with it here. And there's always a third option. And so I think this is such a great topic for anyone. I don't care if you're in high school or you're navigating the some years in retirement, right? There's obstacles all the time that pop up, and I think we
Yep.
all would want to be more resilient.
Yeah. And I know resilience is a kind of a timeless, right, kind of concept, in that it is always good to be resilient and to develop. It certainly is like a muscle or a skill set, right? The more you practice it, the stronger it can get. But I think a lot of times we have these skills that we don't necessarily always know, like the keys. I was talking to a good friend the other day, and he had been going through some real struggles in his marriage. And so I've been just chatting with him, and he's been trying different things out. And they've had about a 2-month period now. It's like the best 2 months of their marriage. They've been married for 15 years. And, they've been able to, moments that normally they would kind of get into that vicious cycle. Something would be said, it would trigger, someone else feeling really hurt and defensive. And then next thing you know, unconsciously, it's off to the races. But they've been able to kind of shift out of that and pivot into having more agile, loving, constructive responses. So I asked him, tell me, what is it that you're doing? And he paused. He's like, that's a great question. I got to be honest. I don't know, right? I don't know what it is that we're doing. I was like, well, I would encourage you to look deeper, because you want to create something, a repeatable framework, right? That your success, your ability to bounce back and avoid going into those awful, no one likes going into vicious cycles, right?
Yeah.
It sucks when you can feel yourself avoiding something, or you can feel yourself putting your foot in your mouth. I've done that so many times.
Yeah.
And don't do it. And then you do it, and then you feel committed to it, right? Now you're like, well, I've already done it, so I might as well double down and triple down on it, as you were pointing out earlier.
Yeah, I've never done that, by the way.
There you go.
Too many times.
But if you can start to develop, through exercises of, being mindful, of learning how to control what you can control and really letting go. There's certain basic concepts that are absolutely critical and essential to developing radical resilience that we want to talk about today. But Mr. David Osk, how do you kind of focus on, like, what happens when you get overly focused on the things you can't control, these external situations, what other people do and say? What happens? Does it tend to increase your resilience?
Boy, I tell you what, I like the word focus there in tandem with resilience. It kind of makes me think of that phrase, what is the definition of success here? And of course, in relationships, right? I mean, life is all about relationships, period. And so when I think of times when, whether it's, marriage or parenting or something like that, and I feel that sense of, we're at an impasse, or we're kind of stuck, or we're in the ditch, that kind of thing. The idea that there is a place that I want to go, it's like, wait a second, it's not just me getting my way, especially when you think of marriage, right?
Yeah.
You pick that up. It's if I win and she loses, boy, neither of us won. I mean, really, it's not there's no, there's no winning in that scenario. And so I think that the definition of success, if you will, just as an example, is where both of us feel valued, we feel heard, we feel like our opinion matters, our general sense of well-being, all that kind of stuff matters. So I think in general, it's, and you often use that phrase, predetermining.
Yeah.
What is it? Not only the principles that I'm guided on, but I think very acutely in relationships, if we've not predetermined what that definition of success is and what we really want that beautiful day to look like, right? Boy, it's really hard to know, what am I being resilient unto and into then?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you bring up such a great, really salient point here. When you're in a difficult moment, having predetermined, right? Suddenly it's kind of like a GPS system, right? That if you have a very clear destination, I know that I want to work towards having more mutually rewarding, fulfilling encounters with, whether it's your employees or your spouse or whoever it might be.
Yeah.
But you've defined what that is, right? You know what it looks like. You know what skills or strengths you bring to that moment. It's like putting in a specific address to GPS system, right? All of a sudden, what pops up is options. Do you want to take the scenic route? Do you want to take the most efficient route? And you can get your brain loves specificity, right? When it has clarity and it has a specific goal in mind, well, now it can really operate at its greatest potential. Yeah. But when you have a vague sense of, I don't know what the outcome, or I don't necessarily what I'm moving to, and I don't know what skills I bring to this moment, your brain just gets flooded, right? And then the cortisol or the emotions of the moment take over, and good luck trying to navigate through that if you don't already have clarity established. Does that make sense?
I love it. I like that idea of a GPS coordinates or an address. It's the certainty around that. Like, hey, sweetheart, guess what? This is where I want to go. I might not be quite sure how to navigate these things, but when you remind yourself, and even the one that you might be in conflict with, that kind of thing. Hey, here's where we're going. This is what I think just feels just right. It feels awesome. Like I want to live over here. I think that is absolutely vital.
Yeah, I love even the feelings, right? Being able to define what are some of the feelings you want to have more of, because that can give you real-time indication, right? All right, am I feeling these things? Like, no, I'm feeling a lot of conflict, right? I'm feeling a lot of regret, guilt, whatever these things are. And we know part of getting into the zone, right? Getting into that flow state, which certainly talk about being resilient. When you're in flow state, that's probably peak level resilience.
Yeah.
But you're getting real-time feedback on how you're performing. And so when you're hitting the mark, right? There's a sense of, I think I've given this example a few times before of the marriage one's just one of the easier things to move to.
Sure.
But where I was on a car drive with my wife, and it was the first 5 minutes of a 45-minute car ride. And she said something that, as a sensitive guy, it hit right in the sensitivity spot. And my initial response was just to emotionally shut down, right? I was going to do the silent treatment. I'm like, now this is what she gets, right? Like, this is the just reaction to that hurtful comment. Yeah. But I was able to pretty quickly, right, be able to realize, like, whoa, wait a minute. This is not what I want to do. This is not the car I don't want to have. It's not how I want to treat my wife. It's not the type of husband I want to be. because I had written out a clear identity statement, right? I understood exactly what type of interactions I had. So I was able to kind of be a little more agile in the moment instead of letting my emotions just determine, because I have, unfortunately, stuck with stubbornly, right, the emotional shutdown. And it creates such an awful vicious cycle, because now we have this terrible car ride, right? We get to this event and I'm putting on a fake smile, but inside I feel like a fake, right? And then we get back and who knows how long that conflict lasts, right? It maybe goes all night, maybe it lasts all weekend. Instead, right, I was able to offer my hand to hold my wife's hand. She went to grab it and I pulled it back really quick like a psych. Thank God she laughed, right? But it broke the tenseness of the moment up.
Yeah.
And then we were able to have a good conversation and we had a lovely car ride. So that got, it was ended up being a deposit into the overall tapestry of our relationship that was positive and building up, right? One of our resilient moments.
Yeah.
So
I love that. I and here's what's interesting too, is you've often used you've said one of your core values is being playful. And I think, isn't it fascinating that you're, even in that moment, right? You just pulled one of those out of the tool belt, as it were, and
well
kind
said,
of
Mr. Osk.
instituted that. Well, I'm listening, by the way. And but really, it's a kind of it's a fascinating thing quite often in those moments of conflict and tension, all that kind of stuff. I might use the phrase, this is not the man that I want to be. Why am I acting in alignment with that? And the more that I've operated now in real clarity with the man that I am, right? I mean, like I have identified those things that are absolutely true to my nature, that I know that when I'm, not flooded with cortisol or, anxiety, and I operate in that space, it's not the man that I want to be. I am that man. And so I think that predetermining, is vital, but there's a real bedrock that you get to with regards to resiliency and operating, just in your own heart and your own mind. That's all you can do, right? That's all you should do. You're using your uniqueness, your values, your desired impact, your story, right, to move the needle. That's all you can do. And at the same time, when you start operating in alignment with that, and then you see things, shift, you see things kind of working out because you refused to kind of go back to that old man, that old person who was maybe, I'll speak for myself, the older person who might have been ignorant, right? I didn't know, immature, like just a maturity thing. Like, man, I acted like a boy and not a man.
Yeah. Yep.
And I let my ego and so on get in the way. It's so neat to, juxtapose those positions, and not that it's perfect all the time, but to very clearly in real time say, no, that's not who I am. This is who I am. And you start operating in that sphere. Oh my gosh, things can shift very quickly. And it, like you said, it feels great.
Love, such a great point, right? I think some of the clients that I'm working with that kind of came in and doing work with, me because of the identity and purpose and that work. And this isn't a shift away from that in any way. In fact, the most resilient people I know are people that have a very secure sense of identity. I think a lot of times where we get off track in responding in a radically resilient way is when we feel threatened, right? When we have uncertainty, but then the insecurity of our identity, right? Not knowing who we are, feels that, that we're threatened. One of the reasons I really wanted to focus on resilience, especially in this time period, is remembering back in 2008 and seeing a very successful group of individuals who completely collapsed because their identity was so rigidly attached to their success and their income. And when the market conditions changed, they just rigidly kept trying to do the same thing over and over again until ultimately, right, all the shame and the walls collapsed in, and they became, very, very self-destructive. And so I believe.
I get that. I mean, there's so many times, that stuff arises like that kind of attack that what you think might be the bedrock, right? That kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
And it might be, honestly, if you've not done some of the deeper work, that kind of thing. And but I like the fact that now that I have a deeper understanding of, who I am, right? And what I value, the space that I want to operate in, the impact that I want to have. It's not that I'm I don't know, it's like I'm expecting to exercise that resilience muscle, right? Because
Yeah.
it's not a matter of if, but when. And sometimes it's multiple times a day. You're like, I just got 5 phone calls that were really, really challenging and so on. And
For sure.
I remember, a very long season of my life. I mean, really a couple of decades that this was not really on my radar, right? I mean, I would hear people talk about these words, resiliency and, never giving up and so on, but it lacked an undercurrent. It lacked wisdom. It lacked a framework. It lacked me. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it was like, wait, I guess I'm just doubling down and I can't give up for some reason, but I really had no idea why. And, what virtues and skills and things that I was bringing forth, let alone a definition of success.
Yeah, love that. And you captured succinctly, almost in that last sentence, probably like 4 or 5 of the principles of radical resilience, right? Being able to know clearly what your values are. Like I don't know how you feel about this, so I'd love to get your input. But when I feel really locked in on my values and I feel like I'm really focused in on them, I feel like I could run through a brick wall. Not that I should, right? But
Yeah.
I feel clear-minded. I feel capable of making really great decisions. I feel really resilient, right? Like there's no way I'm going to give up on this.
Yeah.
And yet I feel we call it existential ADD sometimes, right? All these things throughout the day that just start pulling my attention, news, other people's actions, traffic. I mean, who knows what it is? But all of a sudden, my focus is on things that create chaos. But when I keep bringing my attention back to my values, that resilience goes up. What about you?
Yeah. I don't think there is another alternative to that. It's like I said, the fact that there is a term called resilience requires the fact that there's moments when you're not going to feel resilient.
Yeah. Yeah.
And nobody wants to feel stuck like that. Nobody wants to feel like they don't have any tools in their belt. Nobody wants to feel like their truest nature is inadequate.
Yeah.
And you feel kind of helpless and so on. And just the opposite of that, right, is heck no, like running through a brick wall. I love that.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is I think there's a probably a, I don't know, a cultural paradigm out there with regards to, I'm resilient, rah, rah, rah,
Right.
get out of my way kind of thing. But I think there's a way more mature, and since we're two men talking about this, right, a way more masculine way
Yeah.
to exercise true resiliency inside of our own, maybe the term is comfortable authenticity, right? Meaning I'm going to have confidence to move forward in a meaningful, decisive way. But if I learn something in that moment that I did not know, I've got some new information or, a different way of viewing something, the mature, authentic portion of myself is willing to tap the brakes and wow, I'm not threatened by the fact that I might be wrong and I'm willing to pivot here. So I think that
That's
resiliency is not the absence of of fear and things like that. I think it's better than that. I think it's richer than that.
Yeah, well said. And those things are a given, right? I mean, you're going to experience fear. I mean, like as you said, several times today already, I've experienced those.
Yeah.
So yeah, love, and the ability and willingness to pivot, which again requires a sense of security, right, and who you are, and so really love that concept. And I know some of the other concepts. You mentioned the kind of being a true man. And that a man brings order to chaos, right? And I think just in general, when you think about resilience, it's such a beautiful statement because oftentimes when we're not feeling resilient, it's because we're in a chaotic moment, right? We just got really bad news in our business, right? A deal that we were expecting to go down just fell apart or whatever it might be. We get a bad letter in the mail that's like, now I'm going to have a season of, this would be really whatever it might be. Yeah. But the ability to recognize in that moment, all right, what really matters? Let's give order to this. Let's figure out what really matters and what's most important and focus on that. Let me focus on what I can control. Let me remember what strengths I have. One of the exercises that I love to do that I've been doing with several clients recently is recognize you don't always need to, kind of foster resilience in the moment to recognize that you can borrow resilience from the past. Yeah. So I love asking people, tell me about a time, like one of the worst things that you went through and how you emerged out of it. with a life lesson or maybe stronger than before. And the stories that I'm hearing are so incredible, right?
Yeah.
People have gone through so much and they forget it. We tend to get recency bias. So whatever we're struggling with in the moment, it feels like the worst thing. And we forget that we've often gone through much worse things and that we
Golly.
actually got through them and stronger. I wish I could share some of those stories. They literally bring tears to my eyes.
Yeah.
And as people recall their resilience, suddenly they start to realize, like, wait a minute, I got this,
Yeah.
which is really cool.
I love that. You and I've been talking about, working with some golfers and stuff lately. And I think about, there's so many moments in our lives, where you're kind of under the gun, right? When you think about pro athletes and so on. So picture someone out on the golf course and things are going a little bit awry,
Yeah.
whatever that is. Maybe they just started out the the tournament and they just had an argument with their caddy or something, or, I mean, who knows, right? There's all kinds of things that can happen. Wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be just wonderful in that moment if you didn't feel the pressure of reinventing the wheel in that moment? You didn't, it was this idea of recalibrating to the plumb line that you've already established, as opposed to, I've got to get it together here and figure this out. I mean, the uncertainty around that is borderline debilitating. And I think that, as a golfer as well, you see people out on the golf course. I'm not going to name any names, but there are a few pros out there who have, nicknames, right, where they just completely implode. They might be doing really well, up until the 16th hole or something like that.
Yep.
And something happens and they completely fall apart. I'm not saying I would do much better in that setting, but what would it look like, in that moment?
Yes.
To be able to exhale and say, I don't have to reinvent anything right now. I like you said, I remember all of the wins that I've had in the past, how far I've come, how many things I've pushed through, and I have a clear plumb line of those things that I'm going to activate right now, as opposed to just scrambling, trying to figure that out. And I think that, of course, that can be extrapolated into a moment in, parenting or marriage or conflict at work or things like that. It's a predetermining of what your true north, right? Your course is. It's not magnetic north. It's not just reading the room and trying to figure out what the best thing is. No. I've already predetermined what the best thing is.
Man, you got me on fire right now. And I love it. The sports is such a great illustration because, if anybody that's watched sports, you've probably seen a moment where somebody just cracked under pressure. Yep. It's painful. It's so painful to watch somebody, right, just completely and utterly collapse. And yet we've seen other sports, some sports heroes, that they seem to just rise up when that moment, when the adversity gets, tougher and the stress, rises up. It's like they elevate their game. And I believe, right, that there is a way that you can establish that, like you said, maybe you're not putting for, $2 million, purse prizes or whatever. Maybe you're not trying to win an NBA championship, but the stakes are no less in your life, right? For whatever that might be. And we are in hard times. There's no doubt about that. So the people that I believe are going to be able to respond quicker and quicker to those really difficult moments by getting into growth mode and elevating themselves, they're the ones that are going to stand out. I'll say this real briefly, but there's an interesting ratio that seems to be pretty consistent in thriving, whether this is in personal well-being and your personal happiness, whether this is in marital happiness, or whether this is in business success. And it's this 5-to-1 ratio. Right. And it's what it means. It's kind of like a bank account. We have a negativity bias. So we tend to just give more weight to things that are negative. Okay. So in order to combat that, we need to have a surplus of positive. So in marriage, right, that means that we have more moments of loving connection, holding hands, complimenting each other, being willing to collaborate, whatever those things are, right, versus those times that we spend in conflict or feeling separated from each other. So same thing in business and personal. To me, the biggest key to being able to establish a 5-to-1 surplus it is the ability to rebound from difficult moments. That when something starts to go wrong, oftentimes in the past, I have taken one negative moment, one withdrawal, right? And then I've decided, let's add 15 to those. Yeah. And now I've got to make 60 deposits or whatever it is, right? To be able to try and make up for that, versus what if I had this one negative moment, but my response to that was to immediately respond in a constructive, growth-oriented way. that's a game changer.
And there's nobody listening right now that doesn't experience that paradigm where you double down on stupid, you double down on desperate, you double down on ignorance, and you just can't stand the moment of being in the frying pan. So I'm going to take some action, but when you've not predetermined, when you've not done some of that deeper work, right? Good luck with that. We're obviously launching a course here on resiliency and what that looks like with regards to, everybody dialing that in for themselves uniquely. And it is very unique. You're not going to be able to define resilience by listening to someone else tell you what you should be thinking and feeling.
Yeah, I saw there was a Harvard Business Review article that came out the other day, and it was highlighting right now that companies should be offering resilience training programs, and I fully agree. And granted, the article wasn't meant to be an exhaustive resilience training article, but the examples or the suggestions they gave, it was just very vague. Right. I looked at that and I'm like, there's very little practical action you could take out of this.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to shift. What we're offering at the end of it, you create a radical resilience one sheet where literally, right, you've distilled down the variables and the things, your mindset, the belief, right, exactly what support systems and what different people help, like how they help bring in different parts of resilience so that you can, simplify. And that makes it so much easier, predetermining and simplifying. So in those moments when things get really difficult, you're able to be able to take constructive action quicker and quicker.
Yeah, I mean, I love it.
So we'd love, right, anybody that has questions or, just whatever you can do to bolster your resilience right now and to make it, again, not general resilience. It's great not to quit. We love those stories of just people that show incredible toughness. But we're saying, like, right now, you need to be able to respond to difficult moments by growing, right? That's what's going to really differentiate those who are getting through these tough times and not just getting through them, and not just surviving, but they're growing and thriving.
Thriving. Absolutely. Great word.
So hit us up. We'd love to engage and guide you through this process, or if we can give any resources, that's what we're about. All right, everyone.
Thanks, brother.